Okay, so this second screencast is actually going to discuss how to structure and actually write the personal project report. In the prior screencast, we took a look at this particular screen about how to organize your project report, and on page 39 of your handbook you can find a lot of really helpful information that's detailed to help you structure your project report. Don't forget that the items that you need to submit by both hard copy and upload to ManageBac are the personal project cover sheet, an academic honesty form, process journal extracts, any supporting visual aids if they're applicable, and you can bring them in. If you can't bring them in because they're too heavy or too big, be sure to bring some pictures. Your works cited in bibliography is important. It depends, of course, on the style or format that you are using. If you need works cited bibliography or both referenced in your references. And then, of course, your project report should be divided into the 4 areas of your criteria of the IB rubric, which are investigating, planning, taking action, and reflecting. The length of your report cannot exceed 3,500 words, so keep that in mind as you're writing. While you're writing your report, keep in mind to be very specific and direct. Explain it like we're 5, because your assessors or supervisors must grade based on what you say, not on what you mean. So be sure that you state everything very directly in order to get the highest level of achievement possible for your project report. So some helpful documents to have for your review while you're writing include the Personal Project Handbook. Helpful guidance begins on page 39. And this is what page 39 of the Project Handbook looks like about the project report. And of course there's some guidance there throughout the last part of your handbook that you could use to help you in writing and structuring your project report. Also, page 10 of your handbook is your personal project assessment criteria / rubric. So this is the rubric that you could follow while writing your project report, and also the rubric that your assessors or supervisors will use while they are scoring your project report. There are also 2 other packets that I'd given students for helpful information to review while you're writing. Another one is further guidance for the personal project packet of information, and the front page of that document looks like this, and there are several pieces in this particular packet that are extremely helpful when you're going to be writing your project report. And the front page of the other packet that I've given you was the sample project report from IB that scored straight 8s across everything, the highest levels of achievement. So that packet is very helpful to have on hand when you're beginning to write and as you're writing your project report. So you may want to take a second to grab those 3 pieces of information before you begin writing and as you're going through this particular screencast. So let's start with actually writing your project report. Be sure that you have your cover sheet and your academic honesty form completed. Then you're going to, of course, work on your project report. So, in terms of structure, this particular student has a table of contents. Again, don't use this as a template, just use it to get some ideas in order to write your project report. So every student has to follow the plan of investigating, which is here, and planning, taking action, and reflecting, and have your bibliography, then your appendices. So everybody has to do that. This student's broken it down into subdivisions. You don't have to copy those. They could be your own. You don't have to list those. It's totally up to you based on how you are writing your project report. It doesn't make your score any higher or lower. But the first thing you need to do is to start with investigating. And so if you'll take a look through the student that provided the sample through the IB program, look at what they have written and kind of how they've done that, just to give you a general idea. For example, you need to write about the global context, which is here. So let's take a look at Criterion A and what that looks like in particular. So let me walk you through Criterion A. When you look at your rubric on page 10 of your handbook, it's divided out into, of course, what the IB is scoring you for, and what you need to do for investigating. Define a clear goal and global context for the project based on personal interest. Identify prior learning and subject-specific knowledge relevant to the project, and to demonstrate research skills. I'm looking for you guys to score the 7 or 8 level of achievement. And if you're going to try to do that, you need to be able to define a clear and highly challenging goal and global context for the project based on personal interest. That means there are multiple things within that particular objective to be sure you pay attention to and to be sure you address. You've got to address a clear and highly challenging goal, a global context for the project, and be sure it's based on personal interest. You have to identify prior learning, basically what you knew about the project, and subject-specific knowledge. So did you learn about it in school, for example? And it's got to be consistently highly relevant to some areas of the project. So you could base your project on it and then take a different tangent with it, but you have to start with your foundational knowledge. Then you have to demonstrate excellent research skills. Now that word, of course, excellent, is a little vague, and we're going to talk about what that means. So if you'll go back to the sample report, the student doesn't just state the global context. That will not get you very much in terms of a level of achievement, just stating a global context. But this student has explained how the global context specifically and very directly connects with his project. For further help on writing your personal project report, I would take a look at this particular packet. So you've got your personal project components listed on the front page, and then you've got a personal project report checklist. And so I would also start with looking through this. You know, in your report, do you do these things? So you don't have to do, like, for example, demonstrating research skills. I explained how I may have shared my research skills to help peers who needed more practice. You may not have, but that's just a suggestion by IB with some ideas that you could do, just very general. But there are more specific things that are listed in this particular packet that could help you. For example, if you'll take a look at this particular page that starts with aligning ATL skills with MYP projects achievement levels. So you could use this to help you as one piece of evidence to guide you in terms of writing. So these are some possible ways that you could demonstrate your ATL skills. So for example, try to stay away from the levels 1 and 2 because that's just limited research. So scroll down to and read through them to make sure that you're not just doing that. But if you'll compare like the 7 or 8 level, which is kind of where I'd like for you guys to be, or 5, 6, 5, 6 is not bad either. But if you're going to demonstrate excellent research skills, you're going to need to collect and analyze data to identify solutions and make informed decisions to further the project. You're going to have to be able to explain that in your project report. If you don't have any citations within your project, don't expect to make a level 7 or 8 for investigating. You may just make a level 5 or 6, and that's not too shabby. But if you include some citations, citing your sources within your project can demonstrate the highest levels of achievement. Like, for example, with the student with the rocket sample. He's got some footnotes here. You might do MLA and text citations. He also has a bibliography at the end of his report that divide out his citations and the references that he used just for his project as a whole, and that's okay to do for your project report. You also would need to locate, organize, analyze, evaluate, synthesize, and ethically use information from a variety of sources, so make sure your sources are of a wide range and variety. Using critical literacy skills to analyze and interpret information is this particular note. Understand the impact of media representations and modes of presentation when analyzing information, so you can identify, the sources, and you have to be able to explain how you identified your sources and the fact that you have media interpretations of events, so that recognizing the bias or limitations of your sources are pretty significant. And you have to recognize that in your project report, so you have to state it, or you could even say attach as one of your appendices an annotated bibliography that would do just that. And you could reference that within your project report. Understand and implement intellectual property rights so that you don't, of course, plagiarize. So this particular packet does that for each of your objectives. I don't want to go through and read, I don't think I need to read that to you. You could read that yourselves. And this is just one area of the packet that's helpful in writing your project report, and it does that, of course, for all of your objectives. Also, another area that's helpful is where we get to task-specific clarification. So what this does is to help you, and actually your assessors will have a copy of this as well, take a look at what it means in terms of like stating a goal versus outlining a basic and appropriate goal and defining a clear and challenging goal. And then, of course, level 7 and 8, developing a clear and highly challenging goal in global context based on personal interest. So make sure as you're writing your paper that you can justify or explain or interpret how what you're writing does just this, what it says. So if you want to make a level 7 or 8, that you're doing what it says under task-specific clarification. Based on personal interest, the student defines a clear goal that justifies the goal as highly challenging and meaningfully relates to a global context. If you'll look at the 5-6 area, there's a fine line between explaining and justifying. So explaining means you're stating your goal and why it's personally challenging. But level 7 and 8 will justify it. So it's got to be something that really is clear and highly challenging for you. You have to justify that. This is where you may want to ask your supervisors maybe to help you with the difference as you're closing in on this February 16th due date. So as you're writing your project report, say for criterion A, or all of the criteria actually, I would use this particular section to look at the task-specific clarification and check off to make sure that you could do exactly what the task-specific clarification says for each of these levels 7 and 8. So, for example, A2 is asking you to identify prior learning and subject-specific knowledge relevant to the project. So make sure that you analyze the relevance and contribution of prior learning and not just stating it or explaining it or outlining it, because that won't get you the highest levels of achievement, but you analyze that relevance so that you can make those connections between what you've learned earlier in your academic career and how you are applying that to your project report. A3 is demonstrating research skills. So if you want to demonstrate excellent research skills, again, you need to make sure that you could do these things that are listed here on task-specific clarification for excellent research skills. So you have an extensive range of sources for your project and a variety of sources for your project, that they are consistently and effectively evaluated for their reliability. So if you just state that you use some sources from the internet, but you don't really go into explaining their reliability, then you're not going to be able to achieve the highest levels of scores. So your bibliography is appropriate, consistent, and it's used with sophistication. So you deploy those sources and cite those with sophistication and use in your project report. And there's extensive evidence of a broad range of research skills so that you can identify their validity. There's a wide range and variety of sources that are used that you, of course, are going to explain how you determine the source validity. Those are all very important in looking at achieving the highest levels of scores possible. And of course you can go back to the sample project to look how one student did it. So this is the sample project, sample report again under investigating. So you can look at how one student did this and did it well. Again, you don't have to use it as a template, but to get some ideas about possibly how to word some things or how much do you need to explain it. I guess that's one of the questions students often ask. How far into detail do I need to go? I'd go into some pretty specific detail about how I found my sources and how I determine which sources to use and which sources not to use. How do I know they're reliable? Why did I pick this particular source? So going into that and analyzing that is incredibly important, and you probably did just that, but if you don't state it in your paper directly, then we cannot give you credit for it. Even if we know you probably did it, we can't score you based on you probably did that. You have to state it directly in your report. And one more thing back in this very helpful packet, if you'll scroll through, that does, of course, the task-specific clarification for all of the criteria. And again, your assessors are going to get this to help score your project, so they're going to be looking for these things. But there's also some frequently asked questions that you can utilize. Be sure that you go through that in terms of your process journal and, of course, your report, and that would help with your appendices. Of course, we will send some off for moderation, but we don't know which ones yet are going to be sent off for external moderation. So make sure that you do the very best that you possibly can in that project report. So be sure in your report that you are addressing everything in that highest level of achievement bracket. So for criterion B, you're going to address your rigorous criteria, your plan of action, self-management skills. In criterion C, you're going to be able to create an excellent product or outcome to address your goal, global context and criteria, thinking, communication, and social skills. And then also in criterion D, you're going to be reflecting and make sure that you address each component. And I have those kind of divided out based, here with the evaluation of your product against your criteria, knowledge and understanding of the topic and the global context, and referencing as an IB learner. So I'm going to have one more screencast to wrap this up.